graphically how the third dimension of Cornelius and Zira initially, how that came about. Because neither the appliances, which were brilliant, nor the costumes, which were highly inventive, and neither one of them melded together before the fact to create a reasonable evolution chimpanzee. Evolutionized, evolved. Oh, evolved. That's like dive, dove, divin, right? And that was a combination of the invention of both Kim and myself in the wardrobe department when the costumes were first put on, and hitting an idea of how to physicalize the characters, because they couldn't just be standing up, and that had never been discussed or thought of, didn't look right. And Frank Schaffner, the director's great generosity in accepting the concept that we arrived at, the physicalization, which really is based on Groucho Marx, plus certain things that had to be done to the costume. That's why the full figure is needed to show you how it worked. Plus that once the appliances were on, remember we're over 30 years ago, and the brilliance of the whole makeup was so astonishing, but it was dead. And the way that some life was brought to that is that mercifully both Kim and myself have agile face muscles. I mean, can do this, yeah. And underneath the appliance all the time, we were doing this. So you were working on two tracks, you know, the actor's intent toward the other actor, plus just a basic mechanical thing of doing this. Now, when looks so ridiculous and so severe, sitting here doing that, but that much actually brought a given life to the appliance, so it was just not sitting dead on your face. And also found ways of the breathing channel was through the upper lip, and if you took the snout and pushed it together and blew into it, the whole piece would, you had to be very careful how you do it because you could blow it off. But I mean, so technical. In moments of given anger, so and so do that, and the entire, it looked like the whole skin was expanding, like actually getting red with anger, but your face was, the appliance was bloating a little. And things like that gave this added dimension to the believability, which coupled with the appliances made quite an original statement. The physical, but when we come to doing something outside or whatever, I can show you physically how it was accomplished, how that walk came to be, and how there was an underpinning that was made, which really I invented, which was a T-shirt with a hump, because there was no, without that, and when the physicalization, there was, let's see, it looks like the spine starts in here, but that was done by building up the costume, so it wasn't like this, because then it wouldn't have been.
So that wasn't part of the original design? That's something?
No. I stood for hours in front of it thinking what it was. But I can only show it to you in full figure.
Okay.
All right.
Well, maybe we can, after the interview, when you get off the chair, maybe we could just do a little thing. You can stand back and you can show us some things.
It'd be interesting to use that in comparatively with split the screen and use the actual figure. You know, I mean the
Right.
freeze frame, the Cornelius, so you can see from.
Yeah, because I've been rewatching the films, and that was actually going to be one of my questions for you, was because there was beyond the makeup, there was kind of a whole physical thing that was
Well, without
because
the
when you walk, and there was sort of a rolling
Right.
motion to the.
Well, all of that, when one is full figure, can explain,
Right.
because I thought it wouldn't have worked. The other thing was that unless, the reason I asked Frank about it, because it got the giggles, if we did this and nobody else did it, we'd look like horses' asses, because everybody had to somehow, to some degree, align themselves with that sort of choreography.
So did you teach the other actors this?
Well, no, or just once it was established, or when there was nothing to you just show. You know, it was very tiring to do, because it was very tiring on the legs. When I show you that.
But I mean, did Shatner say, "Oh, yeah, that's great. Now you go show everybody." You and
Well, I think as we got to individual scenes, or maybe I don't know the ultimate vocabulary, how he transmitted that to the other chimpanzees. I don't know. I don't know those particulars.
Were there different movements developed for the chimpanzees versus the orangutans versus the?
Well, the orangutans, of course, were much more lumbering, and the gorillas, of course, were just monolithic. But the whole nimble quality of the chimpanzees, they were the most more nimble of the group. The orangutan, they were. I can't speak for how the situation with the chimpanzees affected the orangutans, if it did, or the gorillas. I don't know. I just really know about my chimp.
You know about the evolution, so to speak, of the Apes project. How did it come about?
Well, I only know what I know, which is Arthur Jacobs was a good friend of mine. Arthur was a very volatile and gregarious fellow with a great tenacity, and of course he'd been in PR, and he was known by everybody. So in my life, I forget why, somewhere in the 60s, I was on a plane coming back from London with Arthur. I forget. We weren't traveling together, we just happened to meet up and talked, and he told me about this project and swore me to secrecy in relation to the end. And he said he wanted me to play this character, Cornelius. Well, it did sound absolutely fascinating, but I took it not with a grain of salt, but it'd be great if that happened, you know. But it was so surreal, a wonderful idea, I thought. And it had then been, as far as I know, it had been a project with Warner Brothers. Blake Edwards had it, as I remember. I had nothing to do with it. I must ask Blake about that, but I don't know what has anybody asked him about his?
We have, well, in the research we found out that he was initially involved to direct it, and then.
But at Warner Brothers.
It kind of, you know, Jacobs apparently went to a few studios getting turned down, and eventually Edwards had to drop out of the project.
But Blake was involved with Arthur? What I heard, and I know that it had an $6 or $8 million budget, which of course in those years is comparable to what, 80 million or something, huge amount, and nobody wanted it. And also luck, I would check. I lived in New York then. I would always see Arthur because he was such fun, and we shared this demented hobby together. We loved old movies, and this is long before it was the craze or possible to see a material like it is now. It's long before the copyright holder realized there was money to be gleaned from exhibitions. So so much of this stuff was unseeable, and we used to get together with a lot of other people and watch the most wonderful things. And Arthur, by virtue of his contacts, had access to incredible footage that was, well, it was like walking through a museum. We used to have wonderful evenings and argue and play card games that were made up of, we played a gin rummy game that we invented that was all movie stars and making movies. Alan Ladd Jr. and Arthur and David Chasman, were these, we used to go over with these stacks of cards and sit down at parties and play this game. And it was fascinating. One time we wanted to market the game with the proceeds going to the Motion Picture Fund, but it was impossible to get clearance approval on all of these various people. And but it was a good idea. Anyhow, as far as I know, this was, I have no idea of the passage of time, but it was considerable. And I was doing other things, and suddenly this did come to pass. From what I understand, primarily due to the test finally that was made by Edward G. Robinson as the orangutan. One of the great things that was negatives from the studios was the fact that historically in film, any actor who was just, quote, lost inside makeups, the films had not been viable, whether it be commercially viable. Alice in Wonderland, the great one in the 30s, had all the stars, and they were so heavily made up. In another one would be, and it was a disastrous failure. I don't think because the film just didn't hit the public's fancy. But there are other films where, outside of Lon Chaney or Boris Karloff, if a known person was disguised to this degree by makeup, for some reason they thought the projects were unmarketable.
Was there also a resistance to science fiction at that time? In terms of, was there a resistance to producing science fiction at that time?
Oh, this is science fiction, isn't it? Yeah. I never think of things in that way. No, I don't think so, because certainly in that category, there have been many films that have been very, very successful in, and ones that hadn't been. Just Imagine was a great flop, which was certainly science fiction. Metropolis, which was German, was a big hit in its arena. I had Journey, what's the one with Michael Rennie?
Baby or Stood Still.
That was before Apes.
Yeah, that was in the 50s.
And that was very successful. Forbidden Planet was before Apes, I think, wasn't it? That was successful. So I don't think it was that. I think the resistance was, number one, it is a very far-out premise. And number two, everybody in it, with the exception of a couple of characters, were apes, chimpanzees, or orangutans. And the buyer just looked at the seller like they were out of their gourd, you know. Eddie's test proved that a personality could register through this sort of dense makeup, and if the actor was intelligent and thoughtful, which Robinson certainly was, that intent could register of Charlton Heston and Frank Schaffner, because Chuck was such a huge money star then that it is his agreement to do the film for, I think, a pittance of a salary that gave it, that floated it in the buyer's mind. And also Frank Schaffner, who did they made a fortune, God bless them, as well they should have. And Arthur's incredible tenacity. I mean, he never, ever flagged. And it was years of rejection. I was always very good. I don't know why he thought of me for it. I have no idea. And I was intrigued by the idea, absolutely intrigued, because makeup's always been a fascination of mine, and 2 or 3 of the best opportunities I ever had on stage involved heavy, heavy makeup, most of which I did myself. And I always found that very inventive and really like the green umbrella. I mean, you really disappeared inside the character. The problem with the first film was I came out, it was all agreed and everything else, and I came out to do the makeup tests. And because as I said, I lived in New York then, and I came out for 2 or 3 days to do and they put that stuff on my face, you know, to take the mask. And in those years, it was not like it is now. I'm slightly claustrophobic. And those straws in your nostrils, and I do, oh, get me out of here. Well, when it was all put on, I began to hyperventilate. I mean, I was really in trouble. And I went back to New York and thought, I can't do this project. I'll die. And then I had a long talk with myself and psyched myself out because I realized the role was, you don't get to do those sort of things. I mean, they don't come along. And the challenge was immense, primarily the challenge of registering through all of this immense disguise and making it a part of oneself, not a foreign situation. And how to be a human chimp as opposed to, you know, being some, you know, asinine indicated monkey or something. So when I talked myself into that, but I would really have to psych myself out every time I would go into makeup, because you had to get onto a different mind bend or you were in trouble. And I always recognized during the canon that came on, when people, because it became a status symbol to be in one of those ultimately, and when people come along and want to do them, and suddenly the makeup began to be applied, and I could see that Sal Mineo I thought was going to die when I've never seen, he looked like, had these great big wonderful eyes, and we knew each other very well, and when it was on, he looked like a deer caught in the headlights, you know, I mean, the look of agony. And it could be agonizing unless you applied a certain menu of behavior. You could go bananas. Sorry about that.
So you, as an actor, didn't mind going virtually unrecognized in the part. You found it to be a challenge. I mean, because you a lot of actors you would think would be attracted to a part. Because like, well, I'm going to be on screen and my face is going to be up there, you know, for 90% of the movie. But you're on there, but you're.
I've really never had those problems. My ego is in another place. The fact of not being recognized is only inside a part. It's only a compliment to me. That was with some people a tremendous issue of despair. The interesting thing is that, in that sense, during the making of the first film, and the content of which was unknown to on the lot, and there you are anonymous, you know, and you're going from one spot to another, and the expression on people's faces, you did feel like you were in a zoo, because people did begin to look and relate to you, this unknown whatever, like you were an animal. And that was very interesting too. I know how those poor things, you know, being poked at. There were great larky things to do. I remember one time in that full drag, you know, everything else, just walking into an executive meeting. I mean, I just walked into one of the big executives' offices. And it was they were all seated around. They were having some big discussion. I just walked right by the secretary, opened the door, went in and sat down in the room. And everybody stopped, because I mean, there was no way, I mean, they didn't know it was just a chimp had come in, you know, and sitting there, and nobody wanted to refer, they would have preferred if I was invisible. I sit there and got up and walked out. Nobody ever referred to it, it happened. Another time, I think on one of the movies, Julie Andrews was making Star, I guess, the Star, yeah. And we knew each other very well from having done Camelot, and we're very close friends. But nobody was, this is the first movie, so nobody was attuned to the fact of chimpanzees being around. And I remember going onto her set and lying down in front of her portable dressing room, knocking on the door. She just... No, I didn't have problems about that aspect.
So did that affect the choices of the other actors who played the apes? I mean, finding people actors that, like you said, had an ego in another place.
Well, number one, I don't think that is known until after the fact. Until one is. It's like that old thing. If you say to an actor, "Oh, listen, can you ride a horse?" "Oh, sure, I can ride a horse." But they've never been on one, right? And so they take 3 quick lessons and go and fall flat on their ass. But the point is, you're game for anything, and it isn't until you're in it that you realize the problems, and those can be translated in various ways. On the first film, it wasn't just the appliance that was so difficult to deal with and the unknown, because you were traveling in no man's land, but the heat, because it was made in August. And that was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And out on the Fox Ranch, I mean, it could be like, you were literally in a temperature of like 130 inside that. And fans, nothing. And I can remember thinking I was certainly verging on senility, because when your face is covered, your skin on your face, it absorbs a great deal of the air, oxygen. And when that's shut off, you can begin really to get dizzy. And in that sort of heat, everything just, time and time again, thought he was going to faint. That was very, and people like Morris Evans, he was valiant, because that was very, very uncomfortable. The whole eating problem, all of those things, because none of that had been thought out. Why should it be? It was an unknown. Unknown things came along, because certainly didn't realize it. I'm allergic to spirit gum, which I didn't really, it's always been uncomfortable, but it was a major, major problem. Now, I mean, it's so many years later, all these sophisticated sort of glues have come along. Liquid adhesive was just coming in, but there was initially, didn't want to use it. I don't know why, but we ultimately did, because I couldn't, my skin would erupt. And one had to be very careful with the sort of adhesives or glues that we use, because if the skin began to break down, there was no road back. And Kim Hunter was so brave, because her skin was so delicate, that putting it on took 3.5 hours. Taking it off for her took over an hour. Me, I just get rid of it, but had to be very careful about this area back in here. And one of the things that was interesting to figure out, from the moment they started putting the makeup on, technically you had to understand that from the moment it was coming on, it was coming off. And you had to be very careful about the maintenance during the day. Otherwise, you could be rendered totally useless. And if you began to move, and then they would have to go in there with orange sticks and glue, and then it became unbelievably uncomfortable. I never ate past like 7 in the morning until it came off, because if the saliva was activated, that was a breaking down agent for around here, and that was very difficult to keep all of those very thin edges, that they would come together, and you could go crazy with being stuck with glue and so.
So they had little makeup pit stops.
Yeah, and one of the things that actors are so volatile and, or most of them, gregarious. Once you had that makeup on, it was highly advisable not to speak at all unless it was inside the work at hand, because all of that was an irritant to the preservation for the day. And people forget, I remember being in it one time 19 hours. And my nervous system began to break because there was no air.
So then you didn't have much socializing then with the other actors who were playing the Apes?
No, because you couldn't really. Lying down after the first movie, I wasn't in the second because I was directing a film in England. So I wasn't in the second, but when the third, I wouldn't make another one in the summer. That was just a stipulation. There's no way to think. And it just was Hades. And then after having done the first film, I did insist that there be air-conditioned trailer to go in and just lie down, to be cool as much as possible between shots. Otherwise, there's a point of no return, and when you get that exhausted, it's dangerous. You know, if your whole system is just wiped out, you can have accidents.
Now who designed the makeup?
John Chambers, who's a genius. But that whole crew, I came out after 10 years partly involved with 4 of the features and the television series. I was doing other work too. But one of the great experiences of my life was the heroic behavior of an army of makeup men who had turnaround that were, sometimes they'd be 6 and 7 hours, that's all, and they'd have to be back there doing it again. And it's the minutiae of it is so extreme. If you make one mistake when you're putting that stuff on, you cause just bleeding agony for the person who's wearing it. If the nose piece goes on, and if your nose was twisted inside that, or when the ears go on, it would be excruciating. There's no way to take it off and start again. So all of that had to be very carefully choreographed by the makeup man, and they were terrific. It's very nerve-wracking. For 3.5 hours, you know, putting this stuff on, and then the toupees, and then the laying of the individual hairs, you know, over that to disguise it. When I knew, well, the day was over, was the moment they put on the hand toupees. I don't know why. That was psychologically, it was a full toupee, it would go here, and then it would be taped up under the costume, and then laid on with glue the hairs here. I hated that. I never figured out why. It was like, the guillotine is just about to. Hated it. But this many years later, of course, when I realized the makeup teams now, it's reached a point where the sons of the guys who were, so many of them on the teams initially, they are now makeup men with children. So it's the basis, of course, that movie and that experiment devised by Chambers is the platform for all of the movies of today. It was so adventurous, it was so far out an idea, and it triggered all this family of film we have now. Nothing would have been possible without what John Chambers put on the table back then.
Now, would he be there every day putting on makeups with
No.
the team?
No. Remember, there were hundreds and hundreds of actors involved with this. So, I don't know how many makeup men there were. It was very specific that the given principal had his own individual makeup man, because it was really like a love affair, and they'd be able to do it day after day after day. And of course, production was, can't you do it in less time? Can't you do it in less time? I would go to sleep and a whole part of the makeup I could just sort of sleep.
And would the other actors do similar things, like him and Maurice?
I don't know. We all have our ways to psych each other into through really impossible situations, because it was impossible to sit for 3.5 hours and have this done to you. It defies the law of common sense in a way. That's what made it so fascinating. Also, I guess we'd start like at 4 in the morning, so then somewhere around 6:30 when all of this part would be on, and before I would eat then, and then it would then lock, so out. That would be for the rest of the day.
Now, how about interaction between the actors playing the humans and the apes? I mean, did you find any socialization between you and Charlton Heston, or?
Well, the thing, when one is working with actors of the caliber of both as actors and as human beings, like Heston, like Don Murray, Ricardo Montalban, I mean, the elegance and the refinement and the responsibility of those fellows is just terrific. So it was grand to be with them. Now, what their reaction was, I don't know. I never asked, really, because, of course, I never felt like I was, quote, a chimpanzee. But then most chimpanzees don't, as far as I didn't feel different.
Because Heston told us an interesting story where he observed, at lunch breaks and things like that, where the actors playing apes would kind of self-segregate themselves. The gorillas would eat with the gorillas, the chimps would hang with the chimps, and the orangutans, and that it was within the apes, just as in the film, there was sort of this segregation going on. It was.
See, I used to go and lie down because, I usually do it at lunch anyway in order to get second wind. So that experience, except for a couple of times, a lot of them used to eat with chopsticks, and they. But none of that worked for me. I'd rather just flake out. But one of the important things, I guess, thinking about the architectures was just to behave normally. Chimp toward, not think that you, because that's one of the great messages in the films, that just because you're a different color or a different race doesn't mean that you are any different from each other. So that's the same thing in relation to playing the role. In the initial film is astonishing, and I can't understand why 20th Century Fox hasn't restored and re-released it on the big screen, because it's a fantastic production. And I think, and there's a whole generation, they can say as much as they want, oh, well, it's on television all the time. That's a postage stamp as opposed to a huge widescreen experience. And that has been proven in recent years to be perfectly valid in putting old material back on the screen in its original gigantic form, and it's overwhelming. And not only to a new generation who have not seen it in that form, but to the old generation who have seen it but have forgotten, because it's like going back to an opera. It's familiar material, but absolutely mind-boggling. And the filmmaking is so damn good. When those guys, the astronauts, that moment in the film, hear, and then the audience suddenly sees what they're hearing, which are these gorillas on horseback, and it's wonderful. It's just wonderful filmmaking. He was very good, Schaffner, very, very good.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say that brings us to sort of a discussion of Schaffner and what kind of a director he was and how he was on the set, and how did he and Jacobs work together? What was that relationship? Was Jacobs involved on the set, or did Schaffner do his thing?
Arthur was obstreperous. Arthur could not be involved with everything, and sometimes it was like, because he was irrepressible, and it was part of his appeal. And sometimes they said, "Would you go to your room?" She'd been up too long, But he was always a supportive and encouraging force, and that enthusiasm was irresistible. Frank was so low-key. Frank was a very, great great, great gentleman. I never ever saw him out of sorts or unkind, and it must have been, I mean, it was no man's land. It was such a new territory to be in. It must have been devastating to have to direct that film. Number one, how could you tell one chimpanzee from another, or one orang? You didn't know who you were talking to half the time. The logistics were very difficult. I mean, I've got footage of it. The idea of how to cut down time, because the film was very expensive. What did it cost? The first, do you know?
5.8.
Well, that's gigantic. A Poseidon Adventure cost 2, which was considered to be, and nobody wanted it. They kept canceling it. But that cost $2 million, and that was considered so excessive. Well, Apes was like $5 million, a huge amount of money. And they kept trying to figure ways to cut down, and the makeup situation was, of course, outlandish to the unjudicious. Outlandish. So they tried to, well, if we put the makeup on in the studio, no, we'll put them on we'll take them out to location. So then there were all these problems. Then the idea, make them up in the studio and take them in cars. Well, it's before the fact of any public knowing that there was such a thing going on. So if you could be on the freeway, or and another car next to you, looking and seeing a chimpanzee sitting in the front seat, you could cause a little bit of disturbance to the. Then the next idea was to, I think this is in this order, to make us up and take us by helicopter to Trancas. And I've got a huge amount of footage of that, flying over Los Angeles in this house. Oh, it's wonderful. Then going there and being without makeup and being made up. All these variations to try and cut down. Ultimately, of course, the thing was you couldn't cut down the makeup time. They were working like Trojans, and that was the time that was needed in order to complete the task. Now, Frank had to deal with all of these unknown problems. He was like General of the Army. I never once saw him out of sorts. Never once saw him unkind. He was. I never spoke to him about it, but because I felt like something was breaking down in my system on the first film, because I would get dizzy, and sometimes I must have been very difficult to connect with. I remember one day him saying to me, "Is everything all right?" Because it wasn't. I couldn't remember a line. And it was, I guess, heat prostration. I don't know, just something casual like that. But he never chastised. That used to drive me crazy, because one is so confined inside that situation, and at least I know, when you have a physical situation when you're encased, you've got to be able to know, like a racehorse, how long the track is. And I used to get upset if I would ask assistant director, what is the outside time do you think we will be through? I wasn't asking it to go home, I was asking it to know in relation to my energies. And if you got, I don't know, recalcitrant assistant, then there would be all this garbage, said, well, waffling. It's better to know the worst, and then if it's 3 hours earlier, how great. But to know the worst, because there's a tendency in shooting to, as the days, the 12-hour day, and then it's extended, so it's suddenly 14 or 15 hours. Then you start later the next day, and so on and so forth. And you get into hours where everybody is like this. The crew, everybody is at their wits' end because they're exhausted.
Do you recall if because of all those factors with the makeup, eating up so much of the budget and the time, did that affect the design of the other design elements of the other aspects of the film? Sort of view of the society, how evolved the ape society was.
I thought the design of the film was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And whatever it cost, I mean, I don't know, but that was an entirely original concept. That amphitheater and where in the first film, it's just terrific. The whole town, it's just wonderful. The invention and simplicity of it all, and I mix them all up. The hall where Zaius it's beautiful to look at, beautiful and weird. And of course, one of the great lighting cameramen of all time did the first film, Leon Shamroy, Grumbleguts. So in that sense, the film had great technicians, wonderful design, and everybody on the line was absolutely galvanized with interest, because it was something that had never been done. It was really entering into the unexpected. And once you've been in a film, you don't have the same reaction to the end product as if you're seeing it and you've had nothing to do with it. Because after all, you know the end, honey. And and also you're watching. I mean, this goes for films I made when I was 12, 13 years old. When I go see them, I can remember what I was thinking in given scenes. Actually, it's like a déjà vu. So you're not seeing just the entertainment, you're seeing a whole complexity of your involvement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my reaction as an audience is technical. It's not visceral. And I just know it's a wonderfully made movie.
Do you recall if the success of it built slowly, or did it come out as sort of a, gotta see it, or was it, I saw
As far as I remember, both Planet of the Apes and Poseidon Adventure were instantaneous. I mean, it was like an avalanche of success. I think it overwhelmed everybody involved with it. I mean, it just took off, like right off the high diving board.
And did it affect, in terms of audience or people's reaction to you? I mean, what did it do for your profile as an actor?
Well, that's strange because, number one, there's a tendency on a lot of people who are hiring you not to really understand how complex it is to play those roles. And it's strange. For instance, I used to hear a lot of people say in authority, well, we can get anybody to play these parts. After all, they're hidden under all this makeup. Of course, that isn't true. Because in order to enhance and override and penetrate through needs a certain acting adjustment and wisdom. And you can't just stand up there and, it doesn't work because you look like some schlemiel, in a funny suit. I don't think on the commercial end that it led to any particular advancement, because while it might be admired, you still, what are you going to do? How many chimp roles can you play? I mean, if you're thinking that way. On the street, I mean, with audiences, to this day, there's just a huge cult